Well, hello everyone. I am joined here by retired Staff Sergeant Marine Johnny Joey Jones. You may know him from Fox News, and we are super lucky to chat with him because he has a new book out. So I would love if you could give our viewers maybe a good, hint of why you wanted to write this book, what it's about, who it's for, and we can just kind of get all into it.
Yeah, so that tells you what it's all about. It's called Unbroken Bonds of Battle. It's a book about relationships. And the original idea was we might do a relationship between two service members, maybe a husband and wife, maybe a service member and their dog. And that's kind of the idea that was brought to me. Hey, this is an idea floating around. We think you'd have a really good insight on this. And once I said, hey, I would love to write a book and it will deal with the relationships, but let me tell you about the book I want to write. And the team was fantastic. They loved the idea. And so to get into it, the book is about 10 people that had a huge influence in my life. But really, it's all the relationships in their lives, all the trauma they went through, all the different obstacles they overcame, and how all of that built them into the person they are to be the person I needed when I needed them. And that's kind of a chain reaction that we all can share in. I mean, everyone in the book overcame extraordinary obstacles or did extraordinary things, but live ordinary lives. And in that way, I think everyone can really identify with them.
I think there's a lot of that needed today. Obviously, people know your story. They know how you were injured. That's all there. But the fact that you chose to bring in, not just your story, but the story of these people around you is pretty special. How often do you get asked, how do you do it every day? You know,
Yeah, I get asked that a lot, I guess. We all go through stuff, though. Like anytime I'm speaking in front of a crowd, I say, listen, I don't know what it's like to have cancer or to go through bankruptcy or to lose a child or both of my parents. Like these are extraordinary, terrible circumstances that people live through every single day, and they don't give enough relevance to their own adversity and what they've gone through and how strong they are. And so, what I try to do is say, if you have all that reverence for me for losing my legs, let me show you how to have reverence for yourself. With these 10 people in the book, I think it really nails that point very well because they come from such different perspectives. Anyone reading the book can identify with one of those people. And they may not say, hey, I went to West Point or hey, I lost my husband in combat. But they can say, you know what, I've walked in their shoes in so many ways. And maybe I have that kind of strength, or maybe I have those kind of people in my life to be there for me. And I think if you know anything about me, to tell my story is to talk about how I like to bring my brothers along with me for the ride. And they are the reason why I'm here. And they're the fun I have when I get to do fun things. They're the people I rely on when I'm going through tough times. And if you watch me on Fox, I bring them in and celebrate them early and often.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And I think that's an important point that you make, not to compare, right? And I think we all have, the tendency to do that, especially in the military community. This is going to be on Military Spouse Magazine. And, while I've heard veterans say, oh, well, I'm not going to go to the VA and get care because there's someone else, that needs it more than me, spouses are kind of the same. Like, I'm not going to fill in the blank, their story is worse. And so you circling it back and saying, no, they're different. But, we're all going to struggle and it's about struggling well. I think that's a really important point to make.
Yeah, listen, adversity is not a race to the bottom. I mean, it's not like you have to have it the worst to get help. I mean, that's not even the point of it all is to not get to your worst before you ask for help. And help can come in different ways. Help can be a friend, a phone call, help can be a program, help can be, financial assistance, whatever it is that you need to get through it. If your compass is oriented towards the other side, then it is the appropriate time to ask for help. And I think with everyone in this book, what you see is help comes in the form of friendship and love and someone there to tell you. Like, for example, Stacy Greer in this book, a lot of people want to know what happened the day I was injured from my perspective. And I can only give you my perspective. But to bring Stacy into the book, her husband was standing 10 feet away from me when I stepped on the IED. It took my legs, but it took his life. And to hear her tell the events of that day from her perspective as a spouse that lost her husband, and to know that she came to me and gave me love and grace and, in a way, forgiveness that I couldn't give myself. I mean, without her, I would not have made it through it. So she's going through this terrible, the worst thing that's ever happened to her, the love of her life, the father of her child. She's lost him, and she has the strength and the wherewithal to make sure I know that she doesn't blame me, that I shouldn't blame myself, that Daniel wouldn't blame me. That's a heck of a person there. And that's the type of strength and friendship we all probably have within an arm's reach, but don't realize it and need. And she in turn needs to know it's okay to grieve not only Daniel's life, but the loss of her husband, what he meant to her. And so to be there for each other in that way, to tell each other it's okay, we all need that. And we don't have to wait till we've hit rock bottom to ask for it.
Yeah, and you brought up a great point. Obviously, military veteran suicide is in the news. We're seeing numbers increase, and they only just started tracking dependent suicide over the last couple of years, and those numbers as well are going up. What would you say to someone who may be watching and struggling, whether they're a spouse or, serving?
Yeah, I don't talk about suicide. I mean, the whole 22 a day, and to me, it's just turned into a culture of its own. What's important to me is before you ever get there, if suicides happen, we've already lost that fight. What's next? What's next is prevent the next one. So what I talk about are the struggles people are going through. How disconnected are we from society? How much does the fact that, so and so, this couple aren't together, they have kids. They got together when they were stationed in San Diego. Now she's going back home to Washington and he's going back home to Georgia. What kind of guilt does that separation create among both of them? How can we talk through that? How can we make sure you see your kids? How can you look at the world through your child's mother's eyes so that it's not selfish? What are the things that are creating the stress? In my experience, and I'm not saying this in a way that dictates, it's just my experience. The majority of the friends I have that have either hit rock bottom and suicide was an option for them, or did commit suicide, the stress that they dealt with wasn't necessarily from combat. It was everything after that. It was not being able to connect to their family. It was feeling guilty for not being there for them. It was all this parts about life that we should be enjoying that are stressful that they didn't know how to cope with. Some of them it was early childhood trauma. Some of them it was the stress and the grief from the combat. But it was the factors after the fact that drove them to it. They didn't know how to be present, to show love, to accept love. And that's tough, but there's a way through it. You can talk through it. You can work your way through it. Some of it is forgiving yourself. Some of it is asking for forgiveness. And all of it is being open to accept love and to accept that the self-awareness of knowing, hey, I'm not functioning correctly. I need to go get help. All of that happens before suicide. If you wait until suicide's the option, you may not win that battle.
Yeah, and I like that you say that, and I think normalizing those thoughts, one of the things, it's really hard. I get an hour with my patients. Everyone knows that I'm a therapist, and I can't solve everything in that hour, right? But one of the things I can do is say, hey, as a human being, we may all have those thoughts of this is hopeless. I can't get through this. I shouldn't be here. I don't know that we talk about ideation enough. Like you said, I don't talk about suicide. I don't want to talk about it's already done. I want to prevent it from happening. What are some ways that you can see we can do better as a society, me as a mental health professional, specifically for the military community?
The biggest thing that I've found in it, we talk about it in the book, is completely by happenstance. We created a group text of 16 combat veterans. Most of them served together, but we all knew each other for one reason or another. We all have credibility with one another. So there are people in that group that I've never met face to face, but we call the same people brother. And we love the same people. So now we have a connection and credibility with one another. I think the group text started over like college football or a hunting trip, something like that. And the group text over time has evolved into yesterday. These are grown men in their 40s and 50s, late 30s, second careers out of the military. And we had a conversation yesterday over a period of hours between the 16 of us about, would we go back and do it again? What do we miss the most about the military? And there's some jokes thrown in there, but a lot of truth thrown in there. But what really matters is when that one person that never really chimes in either in the group text or send the text to the side and says, hey, man, I really appreciate you starting that conversation today because I was having a tough day. That type of communication, just staying connected, is so important. It's not going to solve problems. There are people in that group text that are also in the book that talk about how they were on their wits' end and not continuing to live was an option for them. And the group text, because they realize people still think about them and care about them, people who know what they've been through, that's a big part of it, still think about them and care about them and respect them and honor their service. That was enough for them to say, "Hey, I'm not going through this alone. What kind of changes can I make?" And then the other part of it is, it's rare you find someone hit rock bottom and go to there that aren't self medicating and dealing with addiction, and that's a big one.
Nope, I think that's an important thing to point out. Um, so obviously, you talked about you being approached to write this book. How hard was it for you to get vulnerable? I mean, I feel like, just on Fox and in general, you share a lot of your life. How hard was it to dig in, for this on your part of the story?
In theory, it's not hard for me to be vulnerable at all. I've done it since I was injured, because I felt like it was necessary, and I had a great support group that made me feel secure in doing it. Vulnerability in myself versus holding my friend's hand, metaphorically speaking, while he is vulnerable, two very different things. So when we wrote this book, I wrote my words in the book. I mean, I wrote this book, but to transcribe the words of these 10 people meant a phone conversation. And I had to decide if I was going to be involved in that conversation or not. Really, what the conclusion I came to was, if I got on the phone with my friends to talk about our friendship, what kind of filter is added there? Are they holding anything back or saying something they wouldn't say otherwise because I'm on the phone? So to get the help of Gary Bozak, who went in and had these conversations with my friends, I showed him what we needed to hone in on with each person, and he had the conversation. But to get those transcripts back and to read their perspective of my friendship with them was incredibly not difficult, but impactful. I mean, there's some moments I'm sitting there crying because I didn't know he felt that way. I didn't know this is what was going on. This was what he was dealing with in that moment. The best one I can come up with, I called Amos Benjamin and asked him to go on a hunt with me because I knew his dad had committed suicide and he needed to get it away. What I didn't know until we wrote this book is that he was sitting in a hunting blind when he was told that his dad had committed suicide. So for him to come on that hunt with me after the fact, in my vision to heal and to get away, was actually him deciding, I'm not going to let this negativity that's associated with hunting ruin hunting for me. And so I had no idea till we got his transcript from his chapter that that's how that went down. And so I learned so much about these people that I'm very close to, and to learn about how they perceive our friendship was very humbling.
Love that. And now, I mean, we talked like heavy stuff, but how much did you get annoyed with the writing process? What was it like for you?
I loved every minute of it. I have so much I want to say, which is why I talk for a living, that sometimes I struggle just to organize it or give it a focus. And writing this book allowed me to. I mean, I go in and write about Wesley Hunt's chapter. I don't have a clue what order I want to talk about Wesley Hunt in until I see what he had to talk about. And it just sparks so much creativity and so much opportunity to say, man, we have this in common. Wesley talks about his dad growing up as a black man in the South right after the civil rights movement. And I can think about, my grandfather leaving one part of Georgia and going to another because he wouldn't join the KKK. That wasn't something he was interested in. And now this is a similar time, and we both heard stories from our parents and grandparents about it. We both experienced it from a different perspective, like literally down to the color of our skin is different. But we both came to similar conclusions, and we both have similar outlooks on life and policies and politics. And to know that, something like that can touch people in such different ways, but because our character is similar, because the character of our parents is similar, because the hardships that we saw in life in other areas are similar, we kind of process that information similarly. It was really neat to share that experience with him through the written word, and then to call him and talk to him about it and learn even more, which Wesley's in the book because I've learned so much from him.
I love that. Is there one story? I mean, it's hard to pick, right? I haven't had a chance to read it. My copy's coming, but was there one story out of all of them where you're like, just for the viewers in general, or just for you, that you really hope people take away and like remember, a lesson, if you will?
Not one specifically, but what I'll tell you is each one brings such a different perspective. Each one tackles such different obstacles and issues. That's what makes the book collectively so fun. Certain stories, like the very last chapter, is Keith Stansel. That's the guy I grew up with. I've known that guy for more than 20 years. I've known him since sophomore year in high school. I've been friends with him since our junior year in high school. The first year we didn't like each other because we were chasing the same girlfriends. And so for Keith and I to have gone through so much together and stay friends and stay close, I think that's really something people can take away with the relationships in their life. That when you create a bond, and that's the name of the book, Unbroken Bonds, when you create a bond with somebody based on just who they are at their core, things about them can change. Factors in life can change, circumstance can change, but they don't generally change, and they can continue to be a shining light in your life.
I like that. And I think as a society, we're missing that connection and community. So like that's a really good takeaway for people. When you reflect back on your story, these stories, what are like some top values and non-negotiables for you, going forward? How having experienced what you did, like on how you're going to live your life, you know, tomorrow.
Yeah, listen, first of all, we kind of touched on it earlier. Never compare in tragedy and always share in victory, and you won't go wrong. My dad says, and I say a lot of anecdotes in the book from my dad, but one of the things my dad told me was never loan a friend more than the friendship's worth. And as long as somebody owes you, you'll never go broke. Now, the reason why I put those in there and then the order I put them in is the grace it takes to forgive somebody of their miscoming. So, in that particular example, I'd loaned a friend money and it became very obvious he was not going to pay it back. And my dad's basically challenged me saying, "Hey, did you loan him that money because you thought you'd get it back, or did you loan it to him because you knew he needed it?" And in doing so, is he a loyal friend to you? He may not pay that money back, but would he be there when you called because he knows you were there for him? And so the idea being, don't do something for someone just because they'll pay you back. Do something for someone because you care about them and they need it. And it doesn't cost you, much more than your time usually to do something for somebody. And so that type of grace and wisdom that my dad shares with me is found through me writing his words in the book, but also through example after example of what other people go through and kind of show that themselves.
What's your favorite dad saying? We got to know.
Yeah, I use it a lot. He always said, "Don't complain about the rain, complain about its timing." And really, what that comes down to is sometimes you need the adversity in front of you. You just don't feel like you're ready for it. And sometimes blessings come at inopportune times. I mean, even in my own schedule, there's so many times that I've got to be in this city on Monday and that city on Tuesday. And I lose sight of how much of a blessing it is to go do these two things because it's not going to be a fun travel day. And so to take a step back and say some of these stresses in our lives are things that are ultimately very good for us or something we need or even something we'll enjoy. But because in the way they're happening or the timing, it feels stressful. If we can learn to appreciate it, maybe we can deal with the stress a little easier.
I love that wisdom. And then let's do some fun stuff. I mean, like you said, you're pretty open. You share a lot about your life. But what would you say are maybe three things that would be unexpected for viewers to guess about you, who you are, things you're interested in, however you want to throw it out there?
That one's hard. I can tell you there are kind of three themes in the book. The relationship between the father and son, that's an important theme. Hunting and football. And I did not expect those three things to show up in the book. I didn't mean for them to happen that way. But what it showed me was the things we go through in life really build us towards who we're going to be. And so all of us liken our experiences in the military back to what we did as a kid. And so people might not know I was a 165-pound, 5'10" offensive lineman, and I was pretty dang good at it. And that's going up against 300-pound guys. And so if you don't know anything else about me, know I'm perfectly fine being undersized and taking a hit.
I think that's a good way to start to wrap up. Is there anything that you can think of, that viewers need to know about this book, or maybe a question you haven't been asked yet about the book?
Yeah, thankfully I've had a chance to do 4 book signings already, and we've had 250 to 400 people at each one. I've been asked everything about the book. I think that it's not less than the surprise of what you'll learn from it that you're not expecting, and more so, get into it, read it, digest it, and regardless if you expect it or not, know that if you read it humbly, which we wrote it humbly, it's probably going to change your life. And that's not because of anything I have to say, but because of the people in it. And I can't stress enough what really hits home about this book is that these are extraordinary circumstances, extraordinary actions, extraordinary adversity, but they're very ordinary people. And if they can go through it, you can too.
Okay, I love that. And the book is everywhere. And I have it on good authority that you voice recorded the audible version. Yes.
Yeah, it's so funny. I was sick that day and I was trying to get through it, and I can listen to it and think, man, I wish I would have done this better, done that better. But all the feedback from everyone that's listened to it has been very positive. So I guess I got through it pretty well, and I tried to add genuine emotion reading the book on Audible. So it was a lot of fun.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you for joining us. I know all of the viewers at Military Spouse appreciate it. We do too.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.